This story goes by the title. I had a feeling my wife was getting ready to divorce me, so I quietly moved my assets. 3 weeks later, she filed, and when her plan blew up in her face, she tried to play it off like it was all just a joke. Alright, before we get into today's story, I want to ask you guys for a quick favor. We've noticed the channel's been losing a bit of momentum lately, and honestly, hitting that subscribe button is one of the easiest ways you can support us. It takes just a second, it doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps us keep putting out content you enjoy. Your support genuinely means a lot to us. Let's keep building this channel together. Seriously, thank you. Now let's get into it. So, hey everyone, I've been scrolling through posts on here for a long time, always thinking I'd never be the guy with a story to tell. But life doesn't really care what you expect, and lately it's thrown me something I've been holding on to for months. I guess I just need to finally get it off my chest. Let me say this right from the start. I've never been the kind of guy who jumps to conclusions or assumes the worst right away. My wife, let's just call her R, and I had been together for about 6 years, and for most of that time, things felt solid between us. At least that's what I believed at the time. Sure, we had the normal ups and downs like any couple, but nothing that ever made me stop and think, yeah, something's seriously wrong here. Honestly, for most of our relationship, we were that couple, the kind that felt like true teammates in everything. We'd laugh at the dumbest inside jokes, spend way too long arguing over what movie to watch, and somehow we had this natural rhythm that just worked without effort. She'd go all out planning these thoughtful date nights, and I'd surprise her with her favorite takeout after a long, exhausting day. It all felt easy, like we had this whole love thing figured out without even trying. And that's exactly why what came next hit me so hard. It completely blindsided me. Then, about 6 months ago, I started noticing things changing. At first, it was small stuff, little details you probably wouldn't even notice unless you were really paying attention. She began taking her phone everywhere with her, even for the simplest things like going into the kitchen or folding laundry. Before that, her phone would just sit on the coffee table for hours, and she didn't care who picked it up. One day I joked about it, saying something like, "What? You running some kind of secret spy operation now?" She laughed it off and told me work had just been blowing up her phone with emails lately. Alright, fair enough, or at least that's what I told myself. But then, just a couple days later, she suddenly put a password on her phone. That one really caught me off guard, because she had never done that before. I asked her about it casually, trying not to make it a big deal, and she gave me some vague answer about security and hackers. I didn't push it, mostly because I didn't want to come off as paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. And it didn't stop there. She started leaving the room to take calls, which was something she had never done before. And it wasn't even subtle. Her phone would ring, and she'd say something like, "Oh, let me grab this real quick," and then she'd disappear into the bedroom or step outside onto the porch. If I asked who was calling, she'd just brush it off with, "Oh, just someone from work." Then there was this new habit she picked up, always keeping her phone face down on the table. I didn't even think twice about it at first, until one day I reached over to hand her something, and she quickly slid her phone out of the way. It happened so fast you could have missed it, but for some reason, it stuck in my head. And honestly, it wasn't just about the phone anymore. She started feeling distant. Conversations that used to flow easily between us suddenly felt forced, like I had to drag words out of her. Whenever I brought up anything about the future, like where we should go for our anniversary or whether we should start saving up for a new car, she'd just nod and say, "Yeah, we'll see," and then change the subject. The moment everything really clicked for me happened on this random Wednesday. She told me she was meeting a friend for coffee after work, which didn't seem unusual at all. She's done that plenty of times before. Coincidentally, I was running errands in the same area, and I thought it might be nice to surprise her. You know, just show up and make it a cute moment. But when I got there, she wasn't sitting with any friend. Instead, she was outside the cafe, pacing back and forth with her phone pressed up to her ear. I stayed in my car, because something about the way she was talking felt serious. I wasn't trying to listen in, but I caught bits and pieces like, "It's almost ready," and "We're starting fresh soon." The second I heard that, my stomach dropped. I still didn't know exactly what she meant, but it didn't sound like work or casual friend drama. It sounded serious enough to make me think there was something going on that I didn't know about. Later that night, when she got home, I asked her how the coffee went, trying to keep things light and normal. She gave me this whole detailed story about her friend venting over her boyfriend messing up again. She talked about how she gave advice and just listened like a good friend. I nodded along like I believed every word, but inside my head, things were racing. Was I overthinking all of this? Reading too much into it? Or was there actually something going on that I just didn't want to admit? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, like there was something she wasn't telling me. Things stayed like that for a few more days. I started paying closer attention to how she acted, not because I was trying to catch her in something, but because I needed to understand what was going on. Nothing she did was obviously suspicious on its own, but all the little things together didn't sit right with me. Then, completely out of nowhere, she brought up our finances. We were just having a normal dinner one night, talking about random, everyday stuff. Her job, some new show she wanted to watch, when she suddenly said, with this sweet, innocent smile, "You know, we should really organize all our financial stuff." It caught me so off guard that I just stared at her for a second. "What do you mean?" I asked. She just shrugged and said we should keep everything in one place. Accounts, passwords, documents, just in case something happens. I didn't really know how to respond. We had never talked about anything like that before, and given everything else I'd noticed lately, the timing felt strange. "What kind of something?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She shrugged again and said it was just the smart thing to do. Like, what if something happened to one of us, or we needed to make a big financial decision quickly? On the surface, it all sounded reasonable, but the way she said it felt oddly timed, especially with everything else that had already been bothering me. I nodded and said something like, "Yeah, I guess that makes sense." But inside, alarm bells were going off. Why now? Why suddenly care about organizing everything when we'd always kept things pretty separate and relaxed? That night, I couldn't stop replaying that conversation in my head, trying to figure out what it really meant. Was I just overthinking normal adult stuff? Or was this connected to everything else? The phone calls, what I overheard at the cafe, the distance between us? The more I thought about it, the more it all started to fit together. And honestly, I didn't like where that picture was heading. Up until that point, though, I hadn't actually done anything about it. But then, a couple days later, she brought it up again. We were standing in the kitchen, me putting together a sandwich, her casually scrolling through her phone, when out of nowhere she goes, "So, have you thought any more about organizing the bank stuff? Do you even know where all our account details are?" I paused, set the knife down, and turned to look at her. "All right, what's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice calm but steady. "You've been bringing up money a lot lately. Is there something we need to talk about?" She finally looked up from her screen, looking almost surprised that I actually pushed back on it. "No, nothing's wrong," she said quickly, letting out this small, awkward laugh. "I just think it's important, that's all, you know, for emergencies." "Emergencies like what?" I asked. She just shrugged, her expression giving me nothing. "I don't know, just life stuff," she said. "It's really not a big deal, I promise. I just think we should stay on top of it." The way she answered felt off, too vague, almost like she was dodging the question. I nodded and let it drop in the moment. But the fact that she wouldn't give me a straight answer, that stuck with me. At that point, it didn't feel like some casual suggestion anymore. It felt like there was something behind it, something she wasn't telling me, and I had no idea what. So the next day, while she was at work, I decided to dig a little deeper into our finances. I logged into our joint account and started going through the recent activity, and that's when I noticed something strange. There were a handful of small transfers spread out over the past month. Nothing huge, just little amounts here and there, but they didn't have any clear purpose. They weren't labeled for bills, groceries, or anything normal like that. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it definitely looked like money had been quietly moved out of the account. The problem was, I couldn't figure out where it was going or why. I thought about confronting her right then and there, but something in my gut told me to hold off. If I was wrong, I'd just end up looking paranoid. And if I was right, then I needed to be careful. The whole thing was starting to eat at me. So I reached out to someone I trust, an old college friend of mine who's a lawyer. I told him what I'd been noticing, trying my best not to sound like I was spiraling into some wild conspiracy. After I laid it all out, he paused for a second and then said, "Look, I'm not saying something is definitely going on, but you're not crazy for wanting to protect yourself. If there's even a chance something's off, now's the time to get your ducks in a row. Better safe than sorry." He walked me through a few basic steps, nothing extreme, just ways to make sure my finances would be secure if things went sideways. I'll be honest, even hearing that advice felt heavy, like I was preparing for something terrible without even knowing for sure if anything was wrong. But the more I sat with it, the more it started to make sense. If she really was planning something, and at this point, I was starting to believe she might be, I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I had to protect myself. Still, it wasn't an easy decision. This wasn't just about money. It was about the life we had built together. I kept replaying memories in my head. Our wedding day. Those late nights where we'd talk about our future. All the dumb little jokes we shared that only we understood. And I kept asking myself, how did we even get here? Was this really what our marriage had come down to? Taking those steps felt like admitting something I didn't want to admit, like I was officially letting go of the trust we once had. That night, while she was out, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. My hands were actually shaking as I pulled everything up. Bank accounts, investment accounts, the deed to the house. Every file I opened felt like I was crossing some kind of line. But at the same time, that voice in the back of my head kept reminding me, this wasn't about hurting her. This was about protecting myself. I wasn't trying to sabotage anything. I just couldn't ignore the feeling that if I didn't act now, I'd regret it later. So I made a list, everything I could move, and how to do it without raising any red flags. And as I sat there typing, I felt this heavy pressure settle in my chest. For years, I trusted her completely, and now here I was, quietly preparing for the worst against the one person I thought would always be on my side. At one point, I picked up my phone and called my mom. I didn't tell her everything, just enough so she'd understand why I needed her help. I need you to hold on to a few things for me for a while, I told her. It's nothing bad. I just need to protect myself, just in case. She went quiet for a second, probably trying to read between the lines of what I wasn't saying. Are you okay? She asked, her voice full of concern. Yeah, I said, even though I knew that wasn't entirely true. It's just a precaution, nothing to worry about. She didn't push me, but I could hear the hesitation when she finally said, of course, sweetheart, whatever you need. After I hung up, I just sat there for a moment, feeling this weird mix of relief and guilt. I hated dragging her into this situation, but at the same time, knowing she had my back gave me something solid to hold on to while everything else felt like it was slipping. By the time I got home that night, I had already started moving things around. I moved the money that was solely in my name into accounts my mom agreed to hold for me temporarily, and I made sure all my personal documents were secured. I left just enough in our joint account so nothing would look suspicious, but everything else was secured. And the craziest part? She didn't notice a thing. She walked in like any normal day, gave me a kiss on the cheek, and asked if I wanted to watch a movie. I played along, acted like everything was fine, but inside, I was all over the place. Part of me felt guilty, like I was betraying her, but another part of me felt relieved. Like for the first time in weeks, I wasn't completely at the mercy of whatever was going on behind the scenes. Over the next few days, I did everything I could to keep things normal. I didn't want to give her any reason to think something had changed. She actually seemed pretty relaxed, at times even more cheerful than usual. But instead of calming me down, that only made me more uneasy. If she really was planning something, she was doing a damn good job of hiding it. One thing that really stood out, though, she never brought up the finances again. Not once. After that last conversation where I pushed back a little, it was like the topic completely disappeared. At first, I thought maybe I'd overreacted, and she dropped it because it wasn't that important. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like the opposite. Like she was avoiding it on purpose, almost like she didn't want to risk bringing it up again after I questioned her. I did catch her looking at me a few times, though. Quick little glances, like she was trying to read my mood or decide whether to say something. And every time I noticed, she'd immediately look away and focus on something else, her phone, the TV, a book, anything. It was subtle, but it was definitely there. It felt like she was waiting for me to bring it up, like she didn't want to be the one to push it anymore. And honestly, that silence made me even more uncomfortable. It wasn't like her to just drop something she claimed was important. The way she avoided it now felt calculated. If she was testing the waters, she wasn't getting anything from me. And if she was waiting for a signal, I wasn't about to give her one. Whatever she was planning to do next, I knew one thing for sure. I had to stay a step ahead of it. Something was coming. I could feel it. I just didn't know when it would hit or what it would look like. All I could really do at that point was prepare. That night, I made sure everything was locked down tight. I went through all the paperwork again, carefully double-checking every single detail of the transfers I'd made to my mom. The accounts that were in my name, my investments, and all the supporting paperwork were no longer easy to access. I'd also spoken to a lawyer about protecting myself properly before anything was officially filed. I even gave her a call just to confirm she had every document on her end and that nothing was missing. Then 3 weeks passed, and things felt normal. Actually, too normal. She started acting more affectionate than she had in months. She'd strike up random conversations about work or ask what we should make for dinner, like nothing had ever been wrong. It honestly threw me off, because not long ago she'd been distant, barely engaging in anything deeper than small talk. Part of me started questioning everything. Was I overthinking all of this? Had I built up some problem in my head that wasn't even real? Maybe all her weird behavior was just stress, or something I didn't fully understand. But then, one random Friday night, she asked me to sit down on the couch. She turned off the TV, looked at me, and said, "We need to talk." The second those words left her mouth, my stomach dropped. I already knew what was coming before she even said it out loud. "I think we should get a divorce," she said. Her voice was so calm, it almost sounded practiced. There was no anger, no emotion, Just this cold, matter-of-fact tone, like she was telling me we were out of groceries. I just sat there, staring at her, not even sure how I was supposed to react. She kept talking, explaining her reasons. She said she needed space, that she wanted to find herself, that she felt like she'd lost her identity in the marriage. Basically all the typical lines you hear, none of which actually explain anything. But then she said something that hit differently. You know, I've made a lot of sacrifices for you over the years, and I don't think you really appreciate them, she told me. I deserve more. That part stuck with me, because it wasn't just about her wanting out anymore. It felt like she was trying to flip the whole story, like I owed her something, like this was somehow my fault, and she was just taking what she deserved. I sat there trying to process everything, but one question kept coming back to me. Why now? And then she said something that made the pieces start falling into place. A friend of mine has been helping me see things more clearly, she added, avoiding eye contact. A friend. I didn't interrupt. I just let her keep talking. But inside, my mind was going a mile a minute. Who was this friend? And why were they suddenly involved in my marriage? The way she said it didn't feel casual at all. It sounded like someone had been in her ear, pushing her, convincing her that leaving me wasn't just an option, but something she needed to do. And the more she talked about how she deserved more, because of her so-called sacrifices, the harder it was for me to believe what I was hearing. Sacrifices? What sacrifices? She'd always told me she was happy. Or at least, that's what I thought. I worked hard to give her the kind of life she wanted, and I'm not just talking about money. When she wanted to move closer to her job, I agreed, even though it made my commute worse. When she decided to go on that expensive yoga retreat last year, I made sure we could afford it, even if it meant skipping a trip I'd been really looking forward to. When she changed careers, twice, I supported her both times, telling her to go for it, because I wanted her to be happy. In my mind, being a good husband meant putting her first whenever I could. And it's not like I was distant or checked out either. I showed up. I remembered anniversaries, the little things she liked, the random stuff she mentioned in passing. I planned date nights when she said she felt stuck. I listened when she vented, about work, her friends, her family. I wasn't perfect, but I always tried. That's why hearing her say, I deserve more hit so hard. Because I didn't believe it. Not even for a second. She wasn't unhappy because of something I did or didn't do. Something inside her had changed. Maybe it was that friend she mentioned. Maybe it was something else. But the woman sitting across from me didn't feel like the same person I married. And I wasn't about to let her rewrite the entire story of our relationship just to fit whatever narrative she had now. I didn't argue with her in that moment. Instead, I just nodded and said something neutral like, if that's how you feel, then I guess we should figure out what comes next. She looked surprised, like she expected me to fight for it or beg her to stay. But I didn't. At that point, my focus had already shifted. I needed to figure out what, or who, was behind this sudden, calculated change in her behavior. This didn't feel like something that just happened overnight. This felt planned, and I wasn't going to let it catch me off guard again. After that conversation, she moved into her own place, and by Monday, I was served the divorce papers. And let me tell you, those papers weren't just about ending the marriage. They were about taking everything. Half the house, my savings, my investments, the car, everything. On top of that, there was even this vague clause about spousal support, which didn't make any sense considering she had a solid income of her own. It felt like she was going all in, expecting me to just roll over and hand over everything I'd worked for. At first, I thought maybe she was just being bitter or vindictive. But the way those demands were written, so detailed, so aggressive, made it clear this wasn't random. Someone was guiding her through this. So I decided to start digging. I couldn't exactly ask her directly who she'd been talking to, so I had to get a little creative. I started with her social media. She hadn't blocked me, and even though she didn't post much, I went through her tagged photos and comments, looking for anything new. That's when I noticed a pattern. There was this guy named Brandon who kept liking and commenting on her posts. Nothing obvious or inappropriate, just enough to make me pause and take a closer look. So I clicked on his profile. It was public. At first glance, he didn't seem like anything special, just a guy in his 30s working in marketing, based on his bio. But as I kept scrolling through his posts, something caught my attention. He had uploaded a photo at the exact same cafe where I'd seen my wife weeks earlier. On the same day, I overheard her talking about starting fresh. My stomach tightened as I kept digging. There were more little clues, subtle, but hard to ignore. A comment he left on one of her posts saying, "You've got this." A selfie he posted that looked like it was taken near her new apartment building. None of it was solid proof, but it was enough to raise questions. I didn't know exactly what to do with what I'd found, but I knew one thing. I couldn't just sit around waiting for answers to magically appear. That line she said about a friend helping her kept echoing in my head, and I needed to know who that was. So I decided to call someone who might know. one of our mutual friends, Nicole. She and my wife had been close for years, so if anyone had insight into what was going on, it would be her. I kept things casual at first, just asking if she'd talked to my wife recently or noticed anything unusual. Nicole got back to me pretty quickly, but all she said was that she didn't know anything about any friend or anyone giving advice. I tried asking a few more questions, keeping it light so it didn't feel like an interrogation, but she got defensive real fast and shut the whole conversation down. She kept repeating that she couldn't help me, and honestly, the way she rushed off the call made it feel like she just didn't want to get involved at all. I wasn't ready to leave it there, though, so I reached out to another friend, Samantha. I went through the same approach, explaining that I was just trying to understand what was going on and piece things together. At first, she seemed hesitant, kind of dodging my questions with vague, non-committal answers. When I pushed a little more, she suddenly ended the call, which only made everything feel even more suspicious. I just sat there for a minute, frustrated, trying to figure out what my next move should be. Then, out of nowhere, Samantha called me back. She said she needed to be absolutely sure that anything she told me wouldn't get back to my wife. I promised her it wouldn't. No hesitation. After a long pause, she finally opened up and told me what she knew. Apparently, my wife had been spending a lot of time with a guy named Brandon, someone she met through work. Samantha didn't have all the details, but from what she'd heard, this Brandon guy was heavily involved in the advice my wife was getting about the divorce. Hearing his name felt like a missing piece finally snapping into place. At that point, it was obvious. This wasn't just about her needing space or finding herself. There was someone else in the picture, influencing her decisions, maybe even guiding them. And I needed to know exactly how deep that went. So I decided to handle it my own way. That weekend, I drove over to her apartment complex and parked about a block away, where I wouldn't be noticed. I told myself I just wanted confirmation, even though deep down, I already knew. A couple hours later, there they were. She walked out of the building, with Brandon. They weren't holding hands or anything obvious like that, but the way they moved together, close, leaning toward each other while they talked, it said enough. They got into his car and drove off, leaving me sitting there, staring at the empty spot where they'd just been. I didn't follow them. I didn't need to. Right then and there, everything became clear. She hadn't just fallen out of love with me. She had been planning her exit, with someone else, this whole time. And suddenly, everything made sense. The distance, the questions about money, the aggressive demands in the divorce papers. She wasn't just leaving me. She was trying to leave me with nothing. And she had someone helping her do it every step of the way. I went home that night with my head spinning. The betrayal hurt, yeah. But what really got to me was how calculated it all felt. Like this wasn't emotional, it was strategic. She was using the divorce as a stepping stone into whatever new life she was building with Brandon. The only thing she didn't realize was that I had already prepared for it. The first mediation session was tense the second we walked in. Her lawyer showed up carrying this massive folder. Looked like they were about to take on a Fortune 200 company or something. He started listing off her demands like they were completely reasonable. Half the house, the savings, my investments, the car, and even that vague nonsense about spousal support. I stayed quiet, just sitting there, letting him talk. I wasn't worried. I was waiting. Then it was our turn. My lawyer calmly slid a stack of documents across the table and said, "Before we go any further, I think everyone should take a look at these." Her lawyer picked them up and started flipping through. At first, he looked confident, but as he kept reading, that confidence disappeared real fast. His expression tightened, his eyebrows pulling together more with every page. "What is this?" he asked, clearly confused. My lawyer didn't miss a beat. These documents show that my client had already separated and documented the assets that were solely in his name before the divorce was filed. The records also show the timeline clearly, which matters for determining what is and is not subject to dispute. The room went dead silent. Her lawyer slowly turned toward her, confusion turning into frustration. "You didn't mention any of this," he said flatly. She grabbed the papers out of his hands and started flipping through them herself. Her face went red almost instantly. "This can't be real," she muttered, staring at the dates and notarized signatures. Then she looked at me, and just like that, the disbelief turned into pure anger. "You planned this?" she snapped, glaring at me like I'd betrayed her. "You knew I was going to file, and you set all this up just to screw me over." I didn't say anything. I just sat there and let her connect the dots on her own. Her lawyer, now clearly irritated, asked mine to walk through everything in detail. And that's exactly what he did, step by step, calm and precise, laying out every piece of documentation that made the transfers airtight. The timeline lined up perfectly. The signatures were properly notarized. The trust was solid. There was nothing they could challenge. She was furious. "You're unbelievable," she snapped. leaning forward like she wanted to argue me into submission. "I can't believe you do this to me." I still didn't respond. Because honestly, what was there to say? This wasn't about me doing something to her. This was about me protecting myself, because she had already shown she wasn't walking away peacefully. The meeting wrapped up with her lawyer mumbling something about needing to reassess their strategy. But it was obvious to everyone in that room. They didn't have a move left. When we stepped out into the hallway, she pulled me aside. Her face was this mix of anger and desperation. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "You're going to regret this." I looked at her and said, "I already regret trusting you. That's the only regret I've got." After that mediation session, everything escalated faster than I expected. She completely lost it. It started with the phone calls. One after another, nonstop. At first, her tone was calm, almost apologetic. She left voicemails saying things like, "I think we just need to talk," or "I know things got messy, but we can fix this." When I didn't respond, the tone changed. By the second day, her messages were all over the place. One voicemail would be her crying, saying she made a mistake and didn't want to lose everything we had built. The next would be her yelling, accusing me of being selfish and vindictive, blaming me for everything falling apart in her life. I ignored all of it. My lawyer had already told me not to engage with her, and honestly, I didn't even want to. I was done playing along with whatever game she thought this was. But clearly, she wasn't done. When the calls and texts stopped getting a reaction out of me, she switched tactics completely. She started spreading stories. I began hearing from mutual friends that she was telling people the divorce wasn't even real, that it had all been some kind of elaborate prank. A prank. I mean, seriously, who even believes something like that? It didn't take long before people started poking holes in her story. Friends were asking her things like, "If it was just a prank, why did you file actual legal paperwork?" Or, "Why hire a lawyer and make such detailed demands if none of this was serious?" And when people didn't immediately buy into her excuse, she doubled down. Suddenly, it wasn't just a joke anymore, it was a test. She started saying the whole thing was meant to test the strength of our relationship. On top of that, she flipped the script and tried to paint herself as the victim. According to her, she was hurt by my reaction, that I had taken things too far and destroyed the trust between us. At first, some people actually seemed to believe her version of events. I started getting these weird messages from acquaintances saying things like, "Wow, I didn't realize things were that bad for her." Even her brother came at me, saying, "You should have just talked it out instead of going nuclear like that." And yeah, it was frustrating. But deep down, I knew the truth would come out eventually. And sure enough, it did. Thanks to one of our mutual friends. Let's call him Derek. Derek and I weren't super close, but we'd always gotten along. A couple weeks after the mediation, he messaged me out of nowhere, saying he had something I needed to see. When we met up, he didn't waste time. He pulled out his phone and showed me a chain of texts between her and Brandon. At first, I was confused. "How did you even get these?" I asked, scrolling through the messages. Derek explained that he had a mutual connection with Brandon, someone who had been around enough to see what was really going on behind the scenes. Apparently, that person started feeling uneasy when Brandon began bragging about how he was helping her secure her future. And it didn't take long for them to realize what that really meant. Helping her drain me for everything I had. Feeling guilty for staying quiet, they took screenshots of the messages and passed them along to Derek, knowing he was in a better position to warn me. "This guy's been playing both sides," Derek said, shaking his head. "He's been hyping her up to take you for everything, while promising her he'd be there for her afterward." He handed me the phone and said, "You deserve to know, man." And yeah, those texts were brutal. She wasn't just venting about the divorce. She was actively planning everything with him, and he was coaching her every step of the way. One message from her read, "Once the settlement goes through, we'll have everything we need. I just need him to agree to the terms." And Brandon replied, "Don't back down. Make him feel guilty if you have to. He owes you. We'll start fresh once you've got the money." I just sat there, staring at the screen, trying to process what I was looking at. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't emotions getting the best of someone. This was calculated, cold, deliberate manipulation. I thanked Derek, and after he left, I just sat there with my thoughts racing. Now everything finally made sense. The distance, the sudden focus on finances, the aggressive demands and the divorce. It had all been part of a plan. A plan she'd been working on with Brandon the whole time. Those screenshots didn't stay private for long either. Derek shared them with a few trusted people, and from there, they spread through our circle pretty quickly. And just like that, her entire story started falling apart. People who had been neutral, or even on her side, started pulling away. The shift was fast. The same people who had defended her or stayed quiet suddenly saw her for who she really was. Even the ones closest to her started distancing themselves. By the time everything was finalized, she was left with nothing but her personal belongings. Her lawyer quietly stepped away from the case once it became clear there was nothing left to fight for. All those bold demands she made, they collapsed under the weight of the paperwork I had in place. And the trust once set up with my mom? Completely untouchable. As for Brandon, he disappeared the second things started falling apart. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he had been using her just as much as she was trying to use me. From what I could piece together, he had been feeding her this fantasy: independence, a fresh start, a new life. But the moment it became clear she wasn't walking away with anything, he was gone. Without him backing her up, her confidence completely fell apart. The calls and texts didn't stop, but now they sounded different. Not angry anymore. Desperate. One voicemail was just her saying, "Can we please just talk? I'll do anything to fix this." Another one sounded even more broken. "You don't have to forgive me, but can we just settle this and move on? I'll drop everything if you just talk to me." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Some things you just can't come back from. Even her own family started stepping back. At one point, her brother reached out to me, apologizing for how he'd acted earlier when he believed her side. "I didn't know what she was doing to you," he admitted. "I'm sorry I took her word for it." As for me, I ended up keeping the house, my savings, and something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace of mind. My mom, like always, was there for me. She showed up one day with buckets of paint and a whole list of ideas, helping me turn the place into something that actually felt like mine again. And now, life finally feels like it belongs to me again. No more second-guessing everything. No more feeling like I'm being lied to. Just peace. She's just a chapter in my past now, one I don't go back and reread. And as far as I'm concerned, the rest of my story? That's mine to write.